King of the Hill is grounded, certainly one of the more realistic cartoons that thrives in what is relatable, and that also goes for relationships. Every couple will remind you of one that you've met in real life, including the healthy and happy ones. But like real life, many of these couples have more than their fair share of problems. And today we want to know which couples in Arlen make the happiest couple and which ones are toxic. Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is King of the Hill Relationships, Healthy to Toxic. For this video, we'll be focusing on romantic relationships exclusively, and we'll be starting out with the healthiest relationship and working our way down to the most toxic. These are the healthy relationships. We're giving the top spot to the show's main couple, Hank and Peggy. Are they perfect? No, but it had to be them because who in this show has a healthier relationship than Hank and Peggy? No one that we can think of. Hank can cause issues for his marriage via his lack of desire to communicate. However, he does his best and is good at putting up with Peggy's worst attributes, including her narcissistic tendencies.
No need for Bobby to get all bothered up.
Peggy also does a good job dealing with Hank's rigidity and unwillingness to step out of his comfort zone. Though Hank is a stick in the mud and Peggy is a narcissist, they complement each other well, each bringing out the best in each other and providing a good, stable home for their son. Their relationship is based on mutual respect, understanding, and support for each other's goals and desires. Hank and Peggy prove that the key to a happy marriage isn't avoiding issues altogether, rather it's about working together and rolling with the punches. For their ability to do that, we thought they deserved the top spot. Our silver medal of healthy goes to Lucky and Luann. This one might be controversial. On paper, this relationship shouldn't have worked out. Lucky is a lazy, unemployed, middle-aged man who has spent a lot of his life living off of money he won in a lawsuit. Luann is ditzy, naive, and immature. It sounds like their relationship should have been a one-off episode. However, the show does a good job of showing the audience that they are both willing to grow for the sake of their relationship survival. Lucky underwent several big moments of character growth in later seasons, becoming the kind of guy who has to wear a watch, something that he hates. He does this because he feels Luann deserves a guy like that. Luann didn't slack in this department either. She eventually gets a steady job working at Jack's and is understanding of Lucky's ideals that most people would consider silly or ridiculous. They had several hurdles to clear before settling for the long haul, but they did that and then some. That kind of dedication earns our second spot. For our next spot, we have everyone's least favorite neighbors, Con and Min. As much as we grow to love them, they are frustrating.
That psycho redneck is back.
They're stuck up, rude, and full of themselves. To their credit, they love each other. They even seem to be on the same page in most episodes. What helps their marriage is their shared dream of being successful, rich, and well-connected. It's shallow, but one they work together on. There have been instances where their marriage isn't holding together, such as when Con loses his job and abandons his family out of shame. However, the rare times they do have their issues, they always work it out. Alright guys, before you start with the Brad, actually, in the comment section, yeah, we know about the episode where Peggy implies that Min had a secret affair. However, those same people should remember that King of the Hill doesn't hold its continuity to a gold standard. The show has regularly given its audience contradicting information on several topics. The show's official canon is whatever the writers needed it to be at the time. It's not too far-fetched to think that this was a throwaway line intended to give Peggy the ability to blackmail Min, especially since it's never mentioned before or after that scene. Despite having one of the healthier marriages in the show, it's still disgusting of Con to try and break up his mother, Lauma, and Bill. It's a shame this relationship was only a one-off episode because this was Bill's healthiest relationship, by far. When Con's mother comes around, she wants to keep working at her job as a maid, so she begins cleaning for a couple of the guys on Rainy Street, one of which is Bill. Since Bill is a slob, he gives her work, which overjoys her. Eventually, they form an emotional bond and begin dating. Issues arise, though, when Con tries to split them up, telling Bill that there is another man when in reality there isn't. This leads to them breaking up. However, after a pep talk from Hank, Bill realizes that he still loves Lauma and that he will fight for her. They end up together, and Con comes around in the end. They seemed really happy together. The only fault we can find they had together was that Con's lie could have come out a lot quicker and easier if the two had actually talked it out. However, communication issues are common for new couples, so we'll let it slide. It's really a shame this never worked out. However, the status quo demands Bill be miserable and lonely. From one Bill relationship to another, we have his relationship with Ann Richards. In this episode, Bill begins dating a former Texas state governor. The two are actually happy together. Eventually, though, Bill's ex-wife, Lenore, shows up, trying to renew her relationship with him. Bill ends up cheating on Ann with Lenore, leading to them breaking up. Now, normally, we wouldn't put any relationship that ends with cheating up this high. What makes this work, though, is Ann Richards. Rather than seeing Bill as a dog or a womanizer, she sees that Bill is more akin to a puppet whose strings are pulled by Lenore. The former governor helps Bill realize that Lenore isn't really interested in him. The episode ends with Bill finally being free emotionally from his ex-wife, after he's been in this emotional rut for pretty much the whole series up to this point.
I just came by to wish you a happy birthday.
This relationship may not have ended well, but it's clear it was a net positive for both. That's it with our healthy relationships. We're now moving on to the gray area. These relationships aren't exactly healthy, but they're also far from the worst. At the top of this category, we have Bobby and Connie. This relationship, while on again, off again, isn't that bad. Both of them really care about each other and encourage each other's goals. However, the biggest issue constantly plaguing their relationship is their immaturity. Connie has a bit to answer for. After waiting so long to tell her parents about her dating Bobby, they spent a fairly long amount of time in the show having to hide their relationship, rather than getting out in the open and dealing with the consequences as they come. Now, to be fair to both of them, they are only preteens and have good communication by the standards of people their age. But they are still kids and are not ready emotionally for a long-term relationship yet. On top of that, once Con backs off and they start dating openly, they begin to realize there isn't enough common ground for a relationship. So they do the responsible thing and break up. Even after they break up, they remain good friends and still care about each other. Who knows, maybe if they met later in life after growing up, they might have actually worked out. Next is Luann and Boomhauer. This one was short-lived. It wasn't even the real focus of the episode, but it still happened, so we're counting it. In this episode, Hank's attempt to help Luann with her love life backfires after she starts dating Boomhauer.
Boomhauer?
Boomhauer wasn't looking for anything long-term. He lets her stay with him while she works out her issues with Hank, but he is cold and distant with her. Meanwhile, Luann can tell this isn't working out, but is only sticking by this relationship to get at Hank. And they break up off-screen near the end of the episode. Now we have Bill and Reverend Stroup. They had a lot of fun with their secret relationship, to the extent that after they come clean, Bill gets bored. And this leads to him breaking up with Reverend Stroup. We're putting this one on our lower half because the excitement created from the secrecy seemed to be what was keeping the relationship alive, which is not healthy. They had a lot of fun and there was no abuse, but any relationship that you can only be excited about if it's a secret does not stand much of a chance of surviving. Stroup is less understanding of Bill's shortcomings than Ann Richards was, and it is shown that there is indeed hard feelings. The best thing we can say is Bill didn't drag this relationship out too long after he realized he wasn't invested anymore. Rounding out the neutral category, we have Luann and Buckley. This was more of a run-on joke than an actual relationship. Buckley's too attached to be able to invest himself in a relationship with Luann. It's also implied that he's only dating her for physical reasons. Luann seems to care about their relationship more than him, but she never really pushes him to be a better person or to communicate with her more clearly. On top of that, when Buckley dies in an explosion, she's more traumatized by her disintegrated hair than by her dead boyfriend. There's nothing between these two emotionally, and even if Buckley had survived, we couldn't see this relationship lasting too much longer. Okie dokie, now on to the absolute worst. These are the toxic relationships of Arlen, Texas. Let's start with Cotton and Dee Dee. What makes them toxic is a lack of respect and responsibility. Cotton doesn't view Dee Dee as his equal.
Now, what did you say, baby cake?
He sees her as more of his live-in maid and cook, and we're not sure what she sees in Cotton. The best thing we can say about this relationship is that it doesn't seem as toxic as Cotton's marriage to Tilly, and trust us, we'll get there. Cotton may actually love Dee Dee, but it takes a lot more than love to make a marriage thrive. It takes hard work and accountability, neither of which Cotton has any interest in. Our next spot goes to Bill and Lenore. This ended before the show began. However, we get a good idea of what this marriage was like from the way the characters talk about it. Hank says they were always fighting so loud the whole neighborhood could hear them. Now, it takes two to fight, so Bill is just as guilty. It's understandable how emotions can run high, especially with a spouse who is constantly unfaithful to you. Lenore was emotionally abusive to Bill. She was putting him down and gaslighting him, even walking out on him on Christmas Eve. This marriage turned Bill into the man we see in King of the Hill. Hank says it best, Lenore is a real backbreaker. Cotton and Dee Dee had an unhealthy relationship, but unlike Dale and Nancy and John Redcorn, at least there was some honesty. It was loving and caring, especially in later seasons. Before we get into how terrible Nancy is, it is fair to point out that Dale is a train wreck. In many ways, he's a big child who's incapable of taking care of himself. In fact, Nancy takes care of not only bringing home the paychecks, but also being the responsible parent at home. He performed his experiments in the house and left the remnants laying around. That doesn't justify an affair, but it also doesn't make things easier for Nancy when she has to pay for the bills and do the housework. And his crazy conspiracy theories don't make things easier. With that said, the couple's portrayal in the show is practically centered around Nancy's endless cheating with John Redcorn. If Nancy left her husband, that would be one thing. We can't condone abandoning a marriage for a fling, but it would have been a lot quicker and more honest. Though she does get her comeuppance when she finds out John Redcorn was actually cheating on her during her affair. This ongoing cheating over the course of their relationship is terrible, and the fact that she's taken it to the extreme of hiding the fact that their kid isn't even Dale's biological son is one of the most despicable things someone can do in a relationship. And John Redcorn has a lot of responsibility to bear as well. He's ruining relationships with infidelity, and Dale and Nancy's is the most serious example. But it's nothing compared to Cotton and Tilly. These two divorced before the show started. However, the few brief glimpses we get into their marriage seems awful. Let's be honest what made this marriage fail. I'll give you a hint. It has no shins, a best friend named Topsy, and killed 50 men. It's safe to say Cotton made Tilly take care of all the work the same way he does with Dee Dee.
Well, actually, Hank, I took odd job.
What makes this worse than his second marriage, though, is that he is way more antagonistic to Tilly than he ever has been to Dee Dee. Even after they divorced, Cotton never misses an opportunity to rag on her. Usually, when a relationship fails, both people involved carry some of the blame. This is one of those rare situations where there was a clear-cut bad guy. We're giving the silver medal of toxicity to Bill and Leanne. In this episode, we're introduced to Luann's mother, Leanne. Right from the get-go, we see how this woman is manipulative and sleazy. Eventually, her paths cross with Bill and things get flirtatious pretty quick. The first obvious issue here is how she is constantly having Bill spend all his money on her, to the point he can't even afford his medication for his toe fungus. Yes, toe fungus. Just watch the episode. Ironically enough, it's the return of Bill's toe fungus that drove Leanne back to drinking. She became angry, hostile, and even violent towards Bill. She hit him and even threw a glass bottle at his face. That could have caused serious damage if he hadn't ducked in time. Domestic abuse is what makes us put this into our second place spot. Other toxic relationships in this show may be full of manipulation, gaslighting, and verbal abuse, but this is the only one we ever actually see get physical. We're just glad Bill got out before this relationship got too far. For our most toxic relationship, we're giving this to Hoyt and Leanne. We're putting this above Bill and Leanne because despite the fact that he's a flawed person, Bill is a good guy. Hoyt, on the other hand, while not quite as bad as Leanne, is still terrible. He's a schemer, a liar, and a thief, amongst other things. Even their relationship started out bad. According to Hank, Hoyt was planning on marrying a decent woman who worked as a pharmacist. But during his bachelor party, Leanne was hired as his entertainment.
Yeah, Leanne's bad news.
They hit it off pretty well, and Hoyt left that healthy relationship for this one. We can only imagine how their worst traits are codependent, and eventually culminated in Leanne stabbing Hoyt with a fork. Despite us never seeing their relationship or even having them share an episode, this has to be our worst relationship. Most of the others on this list have some sort of redeemable quality, even if it never got physically violent. It's the lowest possible bar a relationship can clear, but this is one of the only two that does it. And at least Bill really tried in his relationship with Leanne. His negative traits never spurred her on, unless you want to count the toe fungus. It's actually pretty surprising that after growing up in a home with two petty people that made each other worse, Luann turned out so well. Alright guys, that is it. But let us know in the comment section, what do you think is King of the Hill's most healthy relationship? And what about the most toxic? And tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge more of our videos. But most importantly, stay wicked.